Okay, that's the official announcement. Okay, so Peter, if you want to go ahead and put up your screen.
So I go share screen.
Yeah, be sure the little boxes are checked if on the bottom if you have a sound.
Tick the boxes.
Yep.
That's that.
And then click what you want to share and put it in presentation mode. I think you're down in the list here. If you want to go to the, if you go put up there, it says slideshow and say start from beginning.
Oh, hang on a minute. Let me go back again and do that.
Okay.
Right, that's that. That's that. Share. Slideshow from the beginning.
There you go. Awesome. And let me mute my.
Okay. You just gone. Do you want me to start? I hear nobody. Patsy, can you unmute to confirm that you want me to make a start?
Yes.
Okay.
Please do. I forgot I was muted. I'll go right ahead and we're ready to go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all very much for having me here. Despite what Patsy says, I'm absolutely no expert on these things. So, but the idea of this talk is to just give you a brief insight into the Serengeti ecosystem and an idea particularly of why it's so special. But as Patsy said, I just love Africa. I've done over 60 tours there and 35 of them to Tanzania. So that's why I'm sort of fairly passionate about it. So first of all, ecosystem, definition of an ecosystem. I cribbed this off a website and it says a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. So that's technically what we're looking at. But let's look at the location here. Of Tanzania, first of all. It's a large country. It's I'm going to compare it to Texas. It's about 1.4, 1.5 times the size of Texas, Tanzania, dominated by savannas rather than thick rainforests, more typical of West Africa over here. And the Serengeti, which is up in the top here of Tanzania, it's a Maasai name meaning endless plain, which is very appropriate. And it borders onto Kenya, and up in here you've got the Masai Mara, which is contiguous with it, and it runs almost up to Lake Victoria. There are other large areas designated as national parks and reserves in Tanzania, some of them very big and important too. So that's the location. The Serengeti itself, huge size. It's globally important terrestrial ecosystem, and it's one of the few tropical savanna ecosystems of such complexity that's still in existence. You've got, I was rather going to say there are or were ecosystems with migratory ungulates elsewhere within Tanzania, some that used to link up with the Serengeti and others elsewhere in Africa, but many or most of them have been lost or partially so because of human encroachment, but the Serengeti remains intact. The national park, which you can see in this shape here, is 15,000 square kilometers, 5,700 square miles of grassland, plains and savanna, as well as some riverine forest and woodlands. So the Serengeti National Park is about the same size as Connecticut and New Hampshire combined. The park is bordered to the north by the Tanzanian border, Kenyan border, where it's contiguous with the Masai Mara, as I've just said. And to the southeast of the park, you've got other game reserves, and up here, and the Ngorongoro Conservation Area. They sort of act as buffer zones, where some controlled hunting and pastoralism is alongside the wildlife. But combined with the Mara in Kenya and other concession areas, they more than double the size available for the animals. and it makes the whole area about the size of South Carolina. And it's these additional buffer zones that give it the huge size that make it even more special and viable as a very special ecosystem. One of the great joys of this massive area is that, unlike national parks in some other African countries, it's totally unfenced. It's big enough for the wildlife to roam unfettered, and you don't need to fence it off. Now, while there's little time to make meaningful comparisons between this savanna system and the North American prairies, I was asked to do so. So it's worth mentioning here that originally, of course, your prairies were absolutely vast and estimated 170 million acres, stretching from the Rockies to the east of the Mississippi and from Saskatchewan south to Texas. So it was the continent's largest continuous ecosystem, one of the largest in the world, but now largely lost to agriculture. Today, the most fertile and well-watered types of prairie, the tallgrass prairie, I believe has been reduced to about 1% of its original size. So it makes it one of the rarest and most endangered ecosystems in the world, which is a great shame. So let's move on to say very briefly how it was formed. The geology is some of it's quite straightforward, really. On the right here, you've got the Rift Valley, the famous Rift Valley that starts in the Middle East and goes right the way down through East Africa. And it's part of these two bits of land that are sort of moving apart from one another and allowing massive amounts of volcanic activity to proceed and create the Rift Valley. This here is a picture of the Rift Valley taken at Lake Manyara on the northern circuit of Tanzania. So with this volcanic activity, you get huge amounts of ash spewed out from volcanoes. Prevailing winds blow it westwards, and it deposits layers of ash across a large area to the west, creating vast flat plains. The ash solidifies, we're talking thousands, millions of years here, of course. The ash solidifies into a hard pan, preventing tree growth, particularly where it falls thickest, close to the volcanoes. And it's very alkaline, which produces mineral-rich grasses for grazing. So that's really quite simply why the Serengeti is there. The North American prairies were formed, of course, by the Rockies producing a rain shadow to their east, causing a drier climate, reducing tree growth, although there's no hard pan of ash involved, I don't think. So the prairies and savannas are basically exist in areas that are sort of too wet for deserts and yet too dry to support healthy forests. I'll not have time in this talk to mention the equally famous Ngorongoro crater. That's not Ngorongoro. This is here, this big sort of circular thing here. It's not a volcano anymore, it's a caldera. It's a huge collapsed volcano that was thought to have been taller than Kilimanjaro when active. But here you are, the Serengeti is off screen to the left there. And this is, you come up in through these Ngorongoro highlands, drop down into the Serengeti. And it's this long line of volcanoes in the Rift Valley that have produced the Serengeti grass plains in the first place. So next question is, why, unlike the prairies of North America, is it still intact? Well, there's several reasons. The Maasai have been grazing their livestock in the area for around 200 years when the first European explorers visited the area. Thus, even the Maasai, who we sort of think of as the traditional people there, they haven't been there that long. But luckily for us, the Maasai were traditionally not hunters, they were pastoralists. They didn't hunt, they didn't grow crops. They lived nomadically, following grazing and water for their livestock, a bit like the wanderings of the wildlife around them. And so they were very low impact on the environment. There's also, in this area, there's been occasional devastating outbreaks of rinderpest brought in by the cattle of white settlers, which caused decimation of Maasai livestock, buffalo and wildebeest, and causing periods of human abandonment. So this, combined with a disinterest to settle the area due to the lovely tsetse fly that you can see on the left there, meant that the area has been sort of pretty much left alone, because you've got the highlands, the Tanzanian highlands, just like the Kenyan highlands to the east, which have rich volcanic soils, much nicer climate. So most of the white settlers have ended up there. And of course, the other reason why it's stayed intact, it's a hugely important wildlife tourism area for the Tanzanian government and brings in vast amounts of foreign revenue for them. So sadly for the prairies of North America, the soils were much better, and that combined with colonization meant their rapid decline and conversion into farmland. And whenever I go there with groups of folks from America, I always say, you know, just imagine what a fabulous wildlife tourist attraction it would be if you had a chunk of the prairies still in place with the roaming herds of buffalo there. But that may happen yet. Whoops. So formation of the national park is the next reason. The first Brits to enter the Serengeti were in 1913. Big game hunting. There, down here, there's this chap with a fag in his mouth with 2 dead lions. There are tales of 50 lions shot in one safari. Absolutely horrible. And because the hunting made lions so scarce, the British made a partial game reserve of a mere 800 acres in the area in 1921. And these actions became the basis for the Serengeti National Park, which was established in 1951. The Serengeti gained more fame after the work of Bernard Grimek, who is shown in the left-hand photograph there, and his son Michael in the 1950s. They produced this wonderful book and a film called Serengeti Shall Not Die, which widely recognized as one of the most important early pieces of nature conservation documentary. So the Serengeti is the oldest national park and remains the flagship of the country's tourism industry. It's part of what we call the Northern Circuit, encompassing Lake Manyara, Tarangire and Arusha national parks, as well as the Ngorongoro crater. Human habitation is forbidden in the national parks, with the exception of staff and researchers. There's some lovely lodges scattered across the area. And as a result of the biodiversity and ecological significance, it's listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, of course. So let's talk a little bit about the actual habitats that we've got there. So why is it a Serengeti ecosystem? Clearly, it's a vast area with many different habitats, providing many smaller ecosystems. A single rotting log or a tiny pond can be termed as an ecosystem. But so how do we justify this huge area with diverse habitats being described as an ecosystem? Well, the answer in its simplest terms is because you need a huge diverse area like this to support the phenomenon of the wildebeest migration, along with other sort of megafauna, like particularly elephants. So in this picture, you've got riverine forest strips where the rivers like the Mara and the Grumeti River pass through. You've got more open savanna here with acacias. The further west you go, the less influence you get of the hard pan ash, so trees can grow. You've got these volcanic granitic outgrowings called koppies dotted about, and you've got soda lakes and freshwater lakes. But this is the sort of the classic area that you think of, or at least I think of when I think of the Serengeti, the plains, the short grass plains in particular in the southeast closest to the Rift Valley. So the grasslands are the dominant feature and the most important driver for the wildebeest. Some have been traditionally maintained and created by Maasai fire and the influence of elephant populations, others by the hard pan below. They're complex like the prairies. The subtle differences in soils allow different species of grass to proliferate. To the west of the Serengeti, where the hard pan is less obvious, you've got the acacia scrub growing through, and open plains hold thicker, taller grasses, which look good, but some clearly don't have the nutritional value. To the east, where these photographs are taken, you've got where the hard pan is dominant, there are many fewer trees and the grasses look very, very meager. but they've far greater nutritional value. And we're talking here areas of flat grassland like this going on for 20, 30 or 40 miles in every direction. It's most impressive. So the wildebeest migration, which is the famous part of the Serengeti, they reckon there's about 1.5 million wildebeest and another 250,000 of other game animals going with them, about mostly zebras. That sounds like a lot and is truly spectacular at times, but other migrations like this have been lost in Africa. And of course, it's estimated at one point there were 30 or 40 million North American bison roaming the prairies. So, you know, these ecosystems were phenomenal in their time. It's just amazing that this one is still functioning. So why do they do it? Why do they do this migration? You know, there's the portrait of this Gormless-looking wildebeest, and this is what they do. It's just a clockwise ambling on an annual basis. The migration is really dictated primarily by geology and morphology and the variety and position of the various habitats this produces, and then also, of course, by the annual cycle of rains and plant growth. There are traditionally short rains in November, December, and long rains in mid-March to May, though with climate change now this is becoming rather less predictable. So basically they're just doing this circular wandering around, which I'll take you through. So here you are, the famous, you've seen all these in documentaries, the famous river crossings where they all get eaten by crocodiles and seem to do very stupid things. So take no notice of that. You are not here. That's just where the center of the Serengeti is. This is where we are with this red arrow. This is where they're going up, crossing the rivers to get up to the Masai Mara in July, August, September. It's about a 500-mile round circuit. It takes a year. You or I could walk it, but it's not a long journey spread over a year, but there's many diversions as they're going along. They stop, they start, they backtrack and go off in different directions. And then after that, in November time, they are, October, November, they're working their way down the east side of the Serengeti, coming down this way where the red arrow points. And in the spring, in May, June, July, they're circling around and going back, but they go up this side where there's more permanent rivers for them to get water. Now, I'm going to see if this works. This is the sound.
Wow.
That's the sound of mass wildebeest. I listened to that on a winter's evening in Scotland to remind me of where I'd rather be. So this is a picture taken as they're moving south in November. So and as I say, they will move south, but they'll divert 50 miles if they see a thundercloud and there's a bit of rain. They'll move to get green flush of grasses. So they're really just moving in response to feeding and well, the rains that produce the food. And then by January, February, March, they're all down in what's called the real sort of short grass plains down here where this red arrow is for calving, and the calving is really quite special. The entire population resides across this huge, flat, bare, southeast short grass plains to have their calves, and they all have them in 6 to 8 week period. About 80 to 90% are born in a 3-week period in January to March. The reason is, of course, that it's safety in numbers. They're overwhelming their predators with a superabundance of food so that some of the calves might survive. It also allows them to rear their calves and mate again for next year when they're in the peak condition on the best grazing of the year. It's remarkable watching these wildebeest calves being born And of course, they're up and walking and running within minutes of being born. Otherwise, they're hyena fodder. Wildebeest with this broad muzzle, and they've got wide incisors and loose lips, I'm told by the ecologists. It's adapted to rapid bulk grazing on short colonial grasses, which spread by rhizomes. And the grasses respond to this intense grazing, trampling and manuring by rapid regrowth. So the wildebeest feeding in these densities sort of almost maintain and create the type of pasture that they like. So that's wildebeest for you, but there's more to it than just the wildebeest. Tens of thousands of zebras go with them. They reckon there's about 250,000 wildebeest in the Serengeti. The wildebeest, the zebra tend to have most young at the same time as the wildebeest, but they do produce young year round. But the zebras are not ruminants like the antelopes and bovids, so they're grazing on a wider, rougher mix of herbage, opening up the grazing and leaving the smaller, more succulent stuff for the wildebeest in their midst. So they're there all mixed in with the wildebeest at times, but very little competition for food. So they're loosely accompanying the wildebeest as they go round in their big circle. But African elephants too are symbolic of a healthy and viable ecosystem. Although the famed wildebeest migration is what most people think of when you mention the Serengeti, it's the fact that the Serengeti can support a good population of elephants that is equally important indicator of the area's worth. African elephants are found in a huge variety of habitats and able to feed on almost anything anywhere. But without vast intact ecosystems, they've suffered very badly. Small national parks elsewhere have big elephant problems. They need to be fenced in, proximity to encroaching human settlement and agriculture resulting in conflict, culling, big environmental and political problems, seemingly unresolvable. Thank goodness the Serengeti is one of those cherished areas where the scale of the place allows elephants to roam free and act upon the environment as they've done for hundreds of thousands of years before. They're very much at the top of the grazing succession, destroying and damaging trees in the dry season. You can see this one here is just knocked down an acacia and is eating it. It may look catastrophic and is where conservation areas are too small, but creates open bush and grassy areas for smaller herbivores to move into. And then the elephants move on in the rain and eat completely different stuff. The trees regrow in 20 to 30 years and the cycle starts again. So the environment can stand it and is more diverse and complete so long as it's big enough to be able to tolerate it. So there are many other herbivores here to think about. Whilst the huge grassy plains may be reminiscent of the now largely lost prairies, the richness of this particular ecosystem is far greater. I was looking up some statistics and there are about 12 species of herbivores, deer, goats, sheep, bison, etc., across the whole of North America. And you'd maybe find 3, 4, 5 in any one area. Well, in the Serengeti alone, there are over 20 species of herbivores just within the Serengeti, and there's many more across Africa. So it's a very, very rich and diverse environment. They all subdivide the habitats and avoid competition, of course. Different sizes of classes of grazers, varying effects on the functional composition of the grassland plant communities. Where they occur and how sedentary they are depends in part on their drought tolerance, and after a few visits, you just begin to know where to look for certain species. Here I've got pictures of buffalo and impala. Well, the buffalo roam in huge herds and are phenomenal generalists. They browse trees in dense forests, they graze in wide open grasslands, and they're next after elephants in the grazing succession. They're able to eat grasses too tall and rough for smaller ruminants. They sort of prepare the habitat for zebra. The zebra prepare it for the wildebeest, who in turn leave the short grass plains closely clipped and suitable for the specialists such as the small antelopes like Grant's and Thompson's gazelles. The impala, which are shown at the bottom here, another very generalist antelope, much more catholic tastes. than many other antelope. They're browsers and grazers, so more often found in acacia scrub with grassy patches than in the really open grassland. And they're able to stay sedentary in medium-sized male-dominated herds because they're less driven by drought. So those are two of the good generalists. And then there's this whole range of other bits and pieces here. Clip springers in the middle here, sitting proudly on a rock. They're linked exclusively to often isolated rocky granite outcrops called koppies. Dik-diks in the top right here, very drought tolerant residents using low bush in dry areas. Reed bucks here and water bucks in the middle bottom here are, to some extent, they frequent wetter areas, marshy areas with tall grasses for cover and food that other antelopes shun. Bushbuck in the top left here are usually slightly taller, wetter scrub and forest. And while these antelopes graze and browse, you've got warthogs in the bottom left here, digging for roots across bush grassland. So all are more or less monogamous in small family groups, sedentary, moving only for better feeding and drinking. And then you've got another bunch of herbivores here. Hippos are another very important in fashioning the environment in the Serengeti and anywhere where they occur. They wander miles at night time from permanent water sources where they're immersed in the heat of the day. Here you've got this picture at the bottom right here is just the footprints of hippos wandering out after dark onto the grassland, clipping it with this enormous broad muzzle that you can see. They'll eat up to 100 pounds of grass a night. At the bottom center here are elands, the very largest of the antelopes, very nomadic, very drought tolerant, able to browse and graze on a wide range of foods in many different habitats. In the top left here, you've got Koch's hartebeest and Topi in the right here. Both fairly sedentary grazers with narrow muzzles, able to select the more nutritious species in areas of coarser grass. So you see these in the central Serengeti in particular, but carefully picking out the better grasses amongst the coarser stuff. And they never reach large numbers like buffalo, zebra or wildebeest, and rarely seen on the short grass plains. And then of course you've got the poor old rhino in the bottom left there. Nowadays, a very rare browser due to excessive poaching. Browser and partial grazer, again, taking huge ranges of plants from almost all habitats that the Serengeti has to offer. And then, of course, if we're talking about unique herbivores, we can't forget the zebra, the giraffe rather. Clearly highly evolved specialist browser that has a unique niche for itself, browsing from tall trees out of the reach of all the other herbivores except elephants, which just knock the trees over. Their pruning of trees keep bush small and constantly regenerating. Apparently the males browse higher on the trees because they're taller and they go denser into tree cover. So even the two sexes mix up the browsing. So apart from the extraordinarily long neck and legs, they've got very long tongues. I think you can see here this enormous tongue here curling round, and flexible lips, and they've got sort of horny growths on them, protecting them from the acacia thorns. These acacias are enough to puncture a car tire, and yet you'll see a giraffe quite happily stripping them and chewing them up. So remarkable beasts. And then you've got two gazelles, Thompson's gazelles and Grant's gazelles, which are very narrow habitat preferences, largely confined to the much drier, barren-looking short grass plains of the southeast Serengeti. And there are some similar species that almost live in deserts in further north in Africa. Very abundant species, 250,000 of them, Thompson's gazelles, partially migratory and drought tolerant, following green flush wherever the rains have occurred. You can see here, these two photographs are taken in more or less the same place in the southeast, the Thompson's gazelles in an area before it rained and the Grant's gazelles after it's rained. And you can see the difference in the lushness of the grass there, just from a little bit of rain, which is why the wildebeest go down there to calve. So the Grant's gazelles is also very drought tolerant, able when necessary to avoid competition with the huge numbers of Thompsons and wildebeest and zebra by remaining in semi-arid areas or migrating in the opposite direction to them. So that's the sort of range of the things that are eating the habitat. And here's a range of the things that are eating them. Obviously, with such a diversity and abundance of herbivores, it follows that there are going to be equally large numbers of predators. Probably the greatest number of species and individuals of any world ecosystem. The calving wildebeest provides seasonal abundance, but for some of these predators at other times of year when the wildebeest have moved on, finding prey can be quite difficult, so they don't have it easy all year round. Each has their favorite prey and hunting methods. Lions, of course, are the largest of the cats and the only sociable cats. They hunt in groups, or they're capable of hunting in groups. So they're naturally able to take larger prey. This was a picture I took the last time I was there. This lioness crouched in the grass, desperately waiting for one of these zebra to make a wrong move. That's a wildebeest that did make a wrong move there in the top left. So they're taking large prey, especially if they're hunting in groups. They can take buffalo, zebra, mid-sized antelopes, mostly by stealth at night. Mostly resident in prides, with home ranges varying from 200 square kilometers to, or rather 20 square kilometers to 400 square kilometers, depending on the food abundance. The ones in the Serengeti average about 200 square kilometers in a pride. And then there's leopards. There's a mix of pictures there. A very, very different predator, mostly nocturnal, lone hunter, ambushing and stalking generally mid-sized antelopes such as impala. And of course, as you can see here, there's a corpse hanging in a tree. There's a leopard feasting on a bit of, I can't quite work out what that is, but it's feasting up in a tree. And that's how you normally see them. And of course, they can safely store their prey up in the trees to keep it away from any hyenas or lions. Then we've got cheetahs, again, a very different animal. They are smaller, territorial, generally hunting on their own. The females or the males will get together in little groups of 2 or 3. And they're preying on very different animals, Thompson's gazelles particularly, Grant's gazelles, smaller things that run very fast. And of course, it's their speed that allows them to catch the things that lions could only look at and drool over. They hunt by day, stealth and very short high-speed chases. And of course, they eat very, very fast because lions and hyenas will steal their prey. And it also should be said that, you know, well, I'll tell you about hyenas in a minute. In fact, I'll tell you about them right now. There's hyenas. I don't know why hyenas have such a bad press. I think they're one of the most interesting animals in the Serengeti. Misunderstood and maligned creature. It's a predator as well as a scavenger. They can hunt alone or in large groups of 30 or 40 together, depending on what's available. They can call in their mates, and they're relentless. They've got a very different hunting technique. They just lope about, and if there's something there that looks like it's catchable, they'll just pursue it and chase it. They can go on forever. Unlike a cheetah that has to run fast for a few seconds, these things can go on for 10, 15 minutes and just tire their prey out. So large groups, mostly sedentary, but some wandering and nomadic individuals, depending on the circumstances. Slow chases for miles, tiring prey out. Highly social and organized, strongly matriarchal clans. There's some fascinating stuff about their sex life, which I won't talk about here because we're talking about ecosystems. I must read you this though. It's from one of my favorite books on the African ecosystems, and it's talking about how very efficient they are. It says most predators waste or leave up to 40% of their prey, and it says here, spotted hyenas eat virtually everything but the rumen contents and the horn bosses of the biggest antelopes. Disgorged castings 8 inches by 3 inches containing hair, bone, horn, entire hooves, stones and wood are found around the dens. Bone slivers 3 to 4 inches long are swallowed whole and digested with hours. teeth take a little longer. Desiccated corpses, months old, are consumed and yield protein, fat, calcium, and other minerals that sustain milk production during lean times. No other carnivore utilizes vertebrate prey so efficiently. So they really are a marvelous animal. You know, other things that are starving, they can go back and find an old corpse that's sort of, they're just bones, and they'll eat the bones and get sustenance from that. So they're a very, very clever an interesting beast. You can see here this one, again, taken in a recent trip, where they're just waiting for the lions to move off. Here's one eating the snout, the bones of a wildebeest. This one's taking a whole wildebeest off to its den. And there's a fascinating interaction between hyenas and lions. Lions will steal prey from hyenas. Hyenas will try and steal prey from lions. It just depends who's in the ascendancy, who's got the most in their group. So lots of other smaller prey as well. Nile crocodiles here, of course, wonderful survival technique for them. It's feast and famine. They can gorge on wildebeest like this one's about to, and then maybe eat nothing for months and months and months. A lovely range of small cats in the Serengeti, the caracal, servals, which are absolutely beautiful, and other small cats, preying on a myriad of smaller animals, from young antelopes through to reptiles, birds, mice, large insects, etc., hidden in the grassland. Bat-eared foxes in the middle here, beautiful little canid. Distribution almost identical to that of the harvester termite on which it feasts. So it's primarily a termite eater. And then you've got things like genets here, civets, rattels, at least seven species of mongooses, all small, largely nocturnal predators on a whole range of smaller animals within the ecosystem. And then you've got the scavengers, the true scavengers after hyenas. With such an abundance of large fauna and their predators, there's an abundance of followers from scavengers on carcasses to utilize as a waste. 6 species of vulture. This is the vulture, repels griffin, eating a wildebeest that's wandered into the lake and drowned itself. They're pretty stupid creatures, wildebeest. Jackals, which will take their own prey but hang around and scavenge off other people's. Marabou storks in the bottom left here, which will scavenge along with vultures but take all sorts of other live prey. And then right the way down through to insects, you've got dung beetles. This is the size of a golf ball here. Dung beetle rolling a piece of elephant dung away to lay its eggs in it. And this thing in the middle, which is fascinating, it's a buffalo skull with all these little sort of things that look like dreadlocks almost. And this is a moth larvae that utilizes the keratin on in the bone, the sheath of keratin over the actual skull, and they pupate in there and then emerge. So everything gets utilized. It's a wonderful system. And there's some other stuff out there too. You've got a massive array of what you would call small critters, hyraxes, these funny things that apparently are evolutionary related way back to elephants, browsing on trees and foliage, rocky outcrops, many reptiles, fabulous agamid lizards here, uncountable numbers of species of invertebrates, of course. You have butterflies, termites, mounds 6-10 feet tall, leopard tortoises, chameleons. It's a very, very rich environment in such a diverse ecosystem. What isn't very diverse in this area are primates. I mean, you need to go to West Africa to get the full range of primates. So they're quite few. These are the main 3 that you get in this sort of ecosystem. It's too open and there's not enough trees. Vervet monkeys use taller acacia, eating fruits and bits and pieces like that. Black and white colobus monkeys are found in slightly lusher riverine forest, and baboons more abundant, often in huge, highly structured hierarchical groups found everywhere, miles out across the plains even. The ecology of each is very different. The colobus eat large amounts of poor quality mildly toxic greenery, and they sit there with big pot bellies slowly digesting this sort of very poor quality food, a bit like a ruminant. Vervet monkeys, much more omnivorous, fruits, invertebrates, eggs, etc. Baboons are very interesting in that they'll eat anything from grass shoots right the way through to catching their own prey. I've seen a baboon up a tree eating a small antelope. I don't know whether it caught it or not, but it was eating it. And some of them have learned how to catch flamingos in salt lakes. They'll just rush out and grab a flamingo and eat it alive. So a very, very varied diet for the baboon. Something that we shouldn't forget about, of course, here is the evolution of man. This is an ecosystem where man first evolved. So hominids have been part of the Serengeti ecosystem for almost as long as the other inhabitants. That's a picture of Richard Leakey, who first started the ball rolling in this area back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And this is Olduvai Gorge, the famous Olduvai Gorge on the edge of the Serengeti, called the cradle of mankind. It's nothing spectacular to look at, but hugely significant in our understanding of the evolution of our species from early hominids. Layers of the volcanic ash, of course, have preserved all sorts of remains going back to 4 million years ago. And here, this picture is a reconstruction of at Laetoli, where there'd been an ash eruption and it went rainy, and these early hominids have left their footprints and they solidified, and there's this marvelous cast of these early hominid footprints on display at the museum at Olduvai Gorge. But it's a fascinating story for another time, but very humbling to go there and look out and realize that this is where we all started from, just a tiny handful of early hominids wandering out of Africa that populated the entire world, a much bigger migration than the wildebeest do. So being a bird watcher, I've been very, very restrained so far in not showing you any pictures of birds at all, but I'm going to finish with some birds. I left the birds out mainly to emphasize the more obvious elements of the Serengeti ecosystem and time restrictions, but of course birds play a huge part in the complex web of the place. Like the other wildlife, they're gloriously easily seen. Many are big, beautiful, bold and abundant, 500 species present, rivaling many of the rainforest ecosystems for abundance and diversity, but they're much easier to see. It's a permanent home, the Serengeti, for many species, but also an immensely important non-breeding range for birds coming out of Asia and Europe. So there's 40 or 50 species of raptors, falcons and owls, including fabulous things like the bateleur eagle here in the top left, greater kestrel, pale chanting goshawk, the crown martial eagle, a pygmy falcon, and of course this unique bird to Africa, the secretary bird, which has evolved these very long legs so that it can wander through very sedately without getting bitten and catching things like snakes, which it specializes in. And then there's loads and loads of water birds. Hammerkop here is another unique species in a family all of its own, only found in sub-Saharan Africa. Abdim storks migrate within Africa, great white pelicans, grey crowned cranes, lesser and greater flamingos, and black egrets doing this amazing feeding technique where they shade out the sun so they can see their prey under the water. Lots of different feeding, even within the water birds, to utilize all the different parts of the environment. Flamingos, of course, feeding on soda lakes, taking brine shrimp and red-green algae. Other things taking quite large prey, fish, and so on and so forth. So it's an equally diverse division of the habitat. Loads and loads of game birds, wildfowl and shorebirds. Some resident, others relying on the Serengeti for passage and wintering. Jacanas here in the top left, blacksmith plovers, yellow-throated sand grouse, grey-breasted francolin, which is an endemic species of francolin in the Serengeti. The Kori bustard doing this amazing display where it almost turns itself inside out, and knob-billed duck. Huge variety of these these birds to look at. And also lots and lots of very bright, unique and beautiful birds. Landscape is awash with larger, easily seen, brightly coloured birds. Many species within each family, all individually adapted for survival in this very rich ecosystem. Many different bee eaters, lilac-breasted roller, probably the most photographed bird in East Africa, red and yellow barbet, eating termites, oxpeckers adapted, this is a red-billed, adapted to eating ticks and things off a giraffe's leg there. This bizarre thing called a white-bellied go-away bird related to the cuckoos. Tons and tons and tons of these different species, and smaller, brighter still birds. Lots of different sunbirds eating nectar from flowers like hummingbirds do. Red-cheeked cornblurs, the finches, bishops, bush shrikes. Weavers are fascinating in their own right. Many species of weavers building very distinctively different nests. White-headed buffalo weavers. So a fabulous range of birds utilising the insects, the fruits and seeds and so on that are in there. This is a fascinating thing that you could go away and ponder for hours. Convergent evolution. Just two examples here. The one on the right, this is a fantail widow bird living in sort of damp, marshy areas in cattails and things, all black, displaying with these red epaulets. And there you are with your red-winged blackbird living in very, very similar habitats, very similar red epaulets, doing the same sort of thing. Why? I just love to know why that is so important bit of evolution if you're in that environment, even though they're totally unrelated families. Here, there's an even more bizarre bit of convergent evolution. The top bird is a longclaw related to the pipits in Africa, and that is your western meadowlark. They're almost identical, totally unrelated. The meadowlark's an icterid, this is a pipit. And yet there they are, they're living in grassland. They've both evolved yellow, and they've both evolved this sort of V-shaped black collar. How on earth has that happened? And what is so special about looking like that they've both evolved in the same way? It's just absolutely remarkable. But when you're fed up looking at all these wonderful bright birds, you get onto the birds that interest me, the little brown jobs, LBJs. There are many larks, for instance. There are more larks in Africa than anywhere else in the world. And the subtleties are fascinating, each with a very specific, subtly different habitat preference. The soil types can change from 1 mile to the other. It'll produce different grasses and it will immediately produce a different species of lark. So very fascinating the way these birds are just so specific to particular plants or habitat types. The cisticolas are LBJs par excellence. There are 50 plus species, virtually all of them in Africa, all look much the same, but similarly to your North American sparrows, are all difficult to identify, but subtly different in their habitat preferences and with different songs. There are 12 species scattered across the Serengeti, and they're little beauties. I'll tell you what they are from clockwise bottom right. That's my favorite. That's the croaking cisticola, found in taller grassland in the Serengeti. Then in here, where my cursor is, this singing cisticola found in drier, scrubby, open bush. Then this is the trilling cisticola. Most of them are called after their songs because there's nothing to describe them about their plumage. The trilling cisticola found in dry, sparse bush. This one is the wailing cisticola, found in rocky scrub as you go down into the Ngorongoro. And then this one is called the siffling, after the French siffleur, to whistle. You find that in bush grassland and forest edges. This one is the winding cisticola. It inhabits much wetter areas. This one is the default cisticola in dry, scrubby acacia. It's the rattling cisticola. You learn that one as a first bird, and then if you don't hear it singing its song, you know it's something different. And then here in the top right is the zitting cisticola, which is found in damp, wet grasslands. So there you are, you know, you're spoilt for choice with these wonderful cisticolas. But Much easier, of course, and I've not mentioned it until now, the very, very unique ostrich, which is no challenge at all to identify, although it has been split into two. One's got a pink neck, the other's got a blue neck. Much easier to idea, and I've finished traditionally with a lovely sunset in the Serengeti. But let's finish by sort of contemplating this fantastic place. You might think the Arctic tundra and Antarctica are as vast and virtually unspoiled, but African savanna ecosystems are far richer. Nowhere else on Earth has the diversity and abundance of so many large herbivores. Superabundance providing equally diverse range of other small fauna, predators, scavengers, and invertebrates. Go to a tropical rainforest and it has similarly large numbers of bird species and doubtless a greater variety of lush plant life. But it's all hidden away in the understory or high up in the canopy, much more difficult to see. I think Roosevelt apparently said about the neotropics, the diversity is greater, but spread from below soil level to the tops of the canopy, where it is hidden from us mere mortals who pass through quickly. With the African savanna systems, it's all there right in front of your eyes. So let's rejoice in the fact that it still exists and pray that it doesn't go the same way as the North American prairie ecosystem. It does have its threats, crazy plans to put a road right through the middle of it a few years ago, the Maasai settling and requiring more land and increasingly coming into conflict with wildlife, poaching and poisoning. It's not the perfect, but you know, it's still there. And of course, climate change making weather patterns much less predictable. But and whilst wildlife tourism is certainly a hugely important part of several African countries' economies, I hope that for Tanzania, that will be one of the driving forces for keeping it, but they might like to just keep it because it's such an absolutely global treasure and something worth safeguarding in its own right. So that brings me to the conclusion of the talk. If any of you has a wish to visit this region, then Tom and Patsy can give you my email address and I'd be very, very happy to advise you on how to do it. I arrange tours there all the time. I can put you in touch with very good local ground agents, suggest itineraries depending on what you want to see. It's a safe, comfortable place, Tanzania. It's got good roads, good food, good lodges, few insects, pleasant non-humid climate, great 4x4s, specially designed land cruisers. So you've got good game viewing. Perfect for a small group, local driver guides who are pretty knowledgeable, or I may even be free to accompany you myself. So say, despite 35 visits over the past 30 years, I'm always keen to return to what I call my second home. So that's it. If you've got any questions or if anyone's still out there, do come back on screen and have a chat.
Okay, Peter, would you stop your screen share, although that photo is so lovely, so we can see you better. And we do have some comments and some questions in the chat that I will attempt to, and some lovely compliments on the presentation. It was really good. I really appreciate you bringing the parallels in between the prairie ecosystem in the US that we've lost mainly, and so forth. One of the questions is, the book that you were reading from, that you said was one of your favorite books about the about the Serengeti and so forth. Can you give us the name of that so any of us who want to read that?
I could if I could remember it. It's downstairs on my bookshelves, but there it's
you can email it to me.
Yes, I will do. It's a superb book. Oh yes, it's by Richard Estes, Estes, and it's a book that I think might be out of print. He's done a sort of a dumbed down version of it, but the copy that I've got just goes through and it has these most amazingly detailed observations. He spent most of his life out there, and it's a real Bible if you want to understand the ecology of all these things.
Awesome. Well, if you would send that to me, I will put it on the website when we post this video, and people can see if they can find it, because a lot of times we have the used book sources that we can find that. Then we have a question from Becca, and the LBJs, the cisticolas that we all love, are they year-round residents or are they migratory?
No, the cisticolas are basically resident there. Yeah, I don't think there's many migratory cisticolas anywhere in the world, really. No, they all just stay where they should be.
And they are a challenge. I will say that during the lockdown, Peter issued the Great Cysticola Challenge to those of us who traveled with him before. And we had a lot of fun trying to figure out his very clever clues to figure out which cysticola species we were talking about. And the only thing that saved me was having a subscription to Birds of the World with all the cysticolas lined out, thank goodness for Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So we say here we want to, people want to add it to their bucket list. And again, if you are in agreement, I will send out to people who request your email. Yes. And just a personal note that you are helping us to organize a trip, even though you can't go. We would love to have you with us, of course, but since you're locked down, Peter has helped us organize a trip with the ground agents, and one of the best bird guides, aside from Peter, at least the resident bird guide that lives in Tanzania. So we're very grateful for that, because there's a lot of options out there, and some of them are much better than others. So we appreciate that. So you're willing to serve as a consultant as well as a guide. Sure. So we want to thank you for spending this time with us and bringing your penguins with you. Please consider another talk that you enjoy giving to share with us, because it was just so well done. I appreciate all the photos, but the idea of the ecology, how these animals don't directly compete. They're eating different grasses. They're eating at different places on the plains and so forth. So fabulous. Anybody have any last minute questions or comments? You can unmute yourself and ask directly. Or if there's anything, let me make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. Okay.
Next time, if there is a next time I give you a talk, I can maybe do it about sort of midnight my time, so that it's
midnight your time. Okay, well that would be not well attended. Let me try. Let's see.
Midnight my time.
Oh, your time. Okay.
So 6 in the evening your time. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. And we did have someone who said, I had my own birdie guide in Kenya in 2011 for 13 days, and I saw 342 species. Best birding ever.
Oh,
So
wow.
Tanzania would be right up there with that.
Yeah.
I will second that. I went with Peter in 2017?
15.
15. Gosh, it's been that long. It's a great trip. I highly recommend it.
Excellent. Okay, well, everybody, thank you for joining us. And thanks again, Peter. We really appreciate it. We wish you well on your next tour around Scotland while you can still do that. And one of these days, we want to go and join Peter and do Scotland and Southern England, where he's from, and see all the things there. So all the best. And we'll sign off for now and see you on Zoom and in person as soon as possible.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.